This week's episode is sponsored by Neon's film, Presence. Directed by Steven Soderbergh and written by David Koepp, Presence is a thrilling new ghost story about a family that moves into a new home only to discover that they are not alone. Starring Lucy Liu, Chris Sullivan, and Julia Fox, Presence has been hailed as one of the scariest movies you'll see this year. Experience it in theaters on January 24th.
This episode is brought to you by Tinder. Sometimes the best relationships start with moments you didn't see coming. Ever been on a date and underestimated the 3 chili peppers on the menu? Your date felt so bad, they suggested ice cream to cool things down. What started as a spicy disaster ended up being one of the best Tinder dates ever. Explore all of the possibilities for yourself. Tinder, it starts with a swipe. Download Tinder today.
Hey Atlanta, say hello to Small Business Help from Apple. That's right, we're here to make starting and running your business simpler. From helping you choose the right devices to setting them up hassle-free, we can help you build your business in no time. Speak to a business expert and get the help you need at no cost whatsoever. At Apple, we're open for your small business. Go to apple.com/smallbusiness or visit an Apple store to learn more.
You have to control yourself!
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking, looks like you've got a real monster in there. We're talking, you fucking named him Aylmer? And we're talking, when it comes to blood in my underwear, I want to know how it got there. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we're talking ready to crawl across the floor and plead for my juice.
Oh my god. The juice. The juice.
Oh. Everyone, we are discussing our very first Frank Henenlotter film in 1988's Brain Damage.
Yeah, so many people have requested this over the years, and we are always kind of like, that's the one with the penis forehead thing, right? I feel like none of you sold us well on this, because if you had said super, super, super duper queer, then we would have hopped on this earlier.
Well, I think I knew that, because I feel like in the early days of the podcast, when I was doing my Google's queer horror films, I kept seeing Brain Damage pop up, but they kept bringing up the blowjob scene, and so I was like, right. Well, it doesn't sound very queer, but I don't know. But nevertheless, better late than never, Joe.
There we go. Yes. And shout out to the patrons who did acknowledge that this is one of the films they most wanted us to cover when we solicited their requests last year.
Which I hope this is worth it. So, Joe, I guess right off the bat, I mean, because this is your first Frank Henenlotter film too, isn't it?
It is indeed, yes. I know of Frankenhooker, I know of Basket Case, but I have not seen either.
Yes, I am the exact same. Someone gifted me a Blu-ray trilogy of the Basket Case movies, and I just haven't gotten around to watching it, but based on the research I've done, and this may not be a one-to-one comparison, but it seems like Henenlotter is John Waters if he made horror movies.
I mean, that description alone, sold.
Yes, absolutely.
Which, P.S., for this film, sold. This was such a fucking good time.
I agree. I had a lot of... my only real gripe is that I think there are some pacing issues because we have shots that hold for way too long. Although I think I have an answer as to why that's the case. But
okay.
Overall, though, yeah, this was a blast. The effects of this movie are
so good.
Be they the practical puppets or just the psychedelic color effects. It is awesome to look at.
It's really great. And I don't always feel this way about 80s. 80s can sometimes be really good or really bad in terms of practical effects. Sometimes it's low budget and it looks amazing, and sometimes it's low budget and it looks like shit. And I'm kind of happy to report that this is the former.
Yes. Well, because here's the thing, though. Aylmer... The puppet, the parasite, looks like he's clearly a puppet, but there's just the way he looks, the voice acting, the way it's shot. I really believe this is a real thing that I'm looking at.
Yes, so much personality, even when you look at it and you think, oh, this is a Sesame Street reject.
Oh, because I think when it opens its mouth, there's this like little blue hooks inside of it, and I'm pretty sure those are from plastic hangers.
Probably.
But no, I had a lot of fun with this. So, I mean, you just want to jump right in, Joe?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. So everyone, yes, Brain Damage was written and directed by Frank Henenlotter, who broke out into the horror scene in 1982 with his debut feature Basket Case, the one about the guy who hides his deformed conjoined twin brother in a large wicker basket, which, if you've never seen that film and you did watch Brain Damage, that character has a cameo in this movie.
Both of them do, yes.
Yes. That film, interestingly enough, was shot in 1979, but had a very long post-production period, and so it didn't come out until, 82.
Right.
But after it came out, it started to get a bunch of interest, and it was around this time when Henenlotter came up with Brain Damage, and he wrote the script in 1984, though at that time it was called Aylmer the Parasite.
I mean, very straightforward. That is what we're getting, and yet doesn't have the marketability.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think a movie with Parasite in the title is going to make a lot of money, but then I'm like, well, didn't that movie win an Oscar?
Different kind
of Parasite. Also, by the way, I am pulling pretty much all of this from an hour-long making-of documentary on Arrow's Blu-ray release of this. Of course, it was one of those cases where all this information was in the Wikipedia, so
sure.
There you go.
There we go.
But okay, joining the Wes Craven School of college professors turned horror directors, Henenlotter was a professor of English literature, so he had a wealth of knowledge to draw on. And so with Brain Damage, I mean, it's not subtle. We're essentially retelling the story of Faust in a new-ish way. Well, has it ever been told like this before, Joe?
Not quite this way, no.
But nevertheless, it is based on legitimate literature. For financing, they went back to Rugged Films. This is a New Jersey-based company who had temporarily owned the distribution rights to Basket Case, and that company's founder, Roger Grodwick, was really into it. He saw the vision in Brain Damage, which I feel like that's good, because I don't feel like taking this script to a lot of people would have been like, yes, here's money for this movie.
Yeah. I could imagine if you were big in an independent film kind of scene, you might be able to scrounge up a little bit of money. I know that this is not a big budget production.
Right.
But as you said, the title, the subject matter, it's not the easiest of sells.
Not exactly. And so unfortunately for them, so this Roger Grod guy at Rugged Films, he got behind them, financing the very early stages of developing Aylmer. But apparently his source of funds left him just out in the cold, high and dry. So they didn't have any more money. And so they moved on to Embassy Home Entertainment, who invested $1.5 million into the production, which, again, I feel like that's a pretty high budget for 1988, B-movie exploitation.
It's not bad, yeah. Embassy sounds familiar. Do you know if we have seen anything else from them?
So I actually thought this was the Leprechaun movies, but I realized I was getting Embassy Pictures confused with Trimark Pictures.
Right.
It's really just that era of the logos look very cheap. I feel like you would saw them a lot on VHS, but no, they actually did. They did The Graduate back in the 60s, but they also did a couple of John Carpenter films like The Fog and Escape from New York, and then a Wes Craven film in the original Swamp Thing.
Oh, okay, never seen it.
It's interesting. It's not terrible, but it's fine. Okay. But anyway, so I do think, though, it is the effects, and specifically the Aylmer puppet, that are the main talking points in Brain Damage. And the blowjob scene, but we'll get to it.
Yes.
but for good reason, When they were in pre-production, Henenlotter had artists that loved Basket Case that were just climbing over themselves to send him his resume to work on his next movie.
Okay, so he used it almost as a calling card to solicit better people, or maybe just other talented people for a next film.
Well, but these are all guys in the film industry, so maybe they just knew about Basket Case, and they were just I want to work with that guy.
Right, totally makes sense.
Yeah, but so they wound up getting a guy named Gabe Bartalos, who had just finished up his work on 1986's Spookies, and...
Oh, God.
I've never seen Spookies, but I've been told to watch it.
I've heard so much about it. It's basically two films in one, because I think they had financial issues, but as a result, it doesn't play particularly well as a single film.
Okay. Well, they also got Dan Fry, who was wrapping up It's Alive 3, and this is a fun one, A Return to Salem's Lot.
Okay.
But also, the Steadicam operator was Jim Murrow, the director of 1987's Street Trash, which I think just got a remake at the end of last year.
Yes, I did, apparently from our home company.
There. Oh, shit. I should have known that. Well, there we go, y'all. But when Henenlotter got these guys, he told them he wanted Aylmer, because that was still his name at this point,
right,
to look like a black dildo, because it was the most offensive thing he could think of. And I feel like I could think of a lot more offensive things than a black dildo, but okay.
Yeah, I don't love the connotations of that. I guess you could say, what are some things, like I would say, okay, a dildo is going to make people uncomfortable, and that's probably part of the vibe I'm going for.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to deny the phallic nature of Aylmer, but he's also God. I mean, any kind of, like I got a lot of Cronenberg shivers out of this, you know?
Yeah, a little sluggy.
But they had 2 models for Aylmer, though. One smaller one for the wide shots and a large one for close-ups. But the attention to detail in this, because the funny thing is, a lot of the documentary I was watching wasn't really about, oh, how did we get this movie made? It was more so like deep into the effects of the film, which makes sense, but just one little bit of a detail. So like Aylmer, his skin looks like, black brain matter.
Yes.
There are penises in the brain matter. Like there are shapes in the brain mold of his head.
Oh, okay.
In the original script, though, Aylmer speaks to Brian inside his head, and the plan was to have his voice sound similar to Brian's.
Oh, no.
I know. Well, after deciding to have Aylmer's voice be, we'll just say sophisticated, they found their way to a man named John Zackerly, and I admittedly was not familiar with this man, but
me neither.
He was very famous, specifically on the East Coast, for being a horror host.
Okay.
Mainly for a series called Chiller Theater in the early 60s, but he was pretty much a horror host on the East Coast for most of the 50s and 60s.
Amazing.
Yeah. Better yet, he was a horror host that Henenlotter watched a lot in his youth, because that's the other thing. Henenlotter grew up in New York City, and he would constantly in his youth go to 42nd Street and watch all the exploitation and sexploitation films that they showed. And so I imagine that is reflected a lot in his films. I mean, clearly this one.
Yeah, it's so New York.
Yes. What didn't work out, though, is that John Zackerly was a member of SAG, the Screen Actors Guild.
Right.
But Brain Damage was a non-union production.
Ooh,
so
okay.
Zackerly went uncredited for his voice role to avoid fines or expulsion from SAG. It was a whole thing. He apparently was only on set, I want to say, for maybe 2 days. And I don't even think the entirety of those 2 days.
Oh my God. Get in the booth. Record all the lines. Get the fuck out of here.
It makes me think about when we talked about Batman and Robin, how they had to have people with poster boards hiding them as they walked from their trailer to the film set.
Right.
That's what we're doing with Zackerly here.
It's very covert.
Very covert. And there's a lot of psychedelic visuals in this movie, and I think for $1.5 million, they look pretty good. There's a couple wonky compositing effects, specifically I think when his room fills with the blue liquid.
Oh my God, I love that effect.
Oh, it looks great, but you can see a black outline around his arm.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
But I think it looks great. To the point where I don't care about the black outline.
Truly. Yeah.
But for the more colorful hallucinations, they would shoot them in layers and then produce optical compositing. So they would basically shoot 3 different things, layer them all on top of each other, and merge them into one film to give it a psychedelic effect.
Okay.
It was kind of a rough shoot, though, which, it's not quite guerrilla filmmaking, but they were shooting for very long days, 16-hour days, 6 days a week. So they had 100-hour weeks working on this movie.
Okay. And do we know how long they actually shot for?
Joe, they actually, filmed this over the course of 4 months, from January through April of 1987.
Oh my God, that is too many hours and too many days for too many months.
Yes, admittedly, this is IMDb's listed facts, so it may also include post-production, but still,
grain of salt. But yeah, oh God, that is a long time.
It is a very long time, and so they released it in theaters on tax day, April 15th, 1988. But I don't think this was a normal release because I couldn't find any box office information on it. It played in select cities, obviously New York and LA, but I don't think it ever got a wide release.
It doesn't seem like the type. And this is coming from someone who really likes the movie, but this is not a movie for mainstream audiences.
No, it's not. And the version that was put in theaters was pretty heavily edited by the MPAA, specifically the aforementioned blowjob scene.
Mm-hmm.
But I love this. In the script, next to the scenes that required the compositing effects with all the colors, which, you know, we see a lot of violence through that filter, Henenlotter wrote in the script, this should really confuse the MPAA when they try to rate this.
You know what? Good, because fuck those assholes.
Exactly. But here, it comes to VHS. It's still the edited version. We don't get an unrated cut of this movie until, I want to say, 2007 when the DVD comes out.
Oh, wow. Okay. Because, yeah, I mean, one of the other big selling features apart from Aylmer is the gratuitous violence.
Yeah. And I mean, again, like the zipper scene, the blowjob scene is the one that was like kind of trimmed down the most. I don't know exactly what else was cut. But I mean, when you watch the blowjob scene, I think you can pretty much tell like what was cut out of that.
Oh, yeah. And I think it would have actually been relatively easy to cut and just infer what happens. But so much of the effect, like I paused the film to send you a message like, holy shit, this blowjob scene.
Yeah, no, at 100%. It earns the film's infamy? No, it earns the film's notoriety.
Truly, yes.
Critical reception was mostly mixed, although it has become a cult film over the years. I am ashamed to say this. Like when people were initially like requesting that we cover this, I had never heard of it before.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I knew Henenlotter's name, but the only title I truly knew was Basket Case.
Ooh, actually, listeners, tell us whenever we do our next Henenlotter, should we prioritize Basket Case or should we prioritize Frankenhooker? I really want to know.
Yes.
But anyway, so we're looking at a 64% on Rotten Tomatoes with an average score of 6.1 out of 10.
Boo.
Whereas Letterboxd users have awarded it, this is my new 2025 thing, they've awarded it a 3.5 out of 5 or a 7 out of 10.
Okay. Better.
One last thing before I pass it off to you, Joe. So you know how like we talk a lot about how horror filmmakers and specifically PR firms, they don't like to call their horror movies. They call them thrillers or whatever. Okay, this is a direct quote from Henenlotter, and I love this because he also doesn't really say he makes horror films. But it's not the answer you're going to think. He says, and I quote, "I never felt that I made horror films. I always felt that I made exploitation films."
Yes! Yes!
Exploitation films have an attitude more than anything. An attitude that you don't find with mainstream Hollywood productions. They're a little ruder, a little raunchier. They deal with material people don't usually touch on, whether it's sex or drugs or rock and roll.
Oh my God, he gets it. Because, like, even if you hadn't told me that was a quote that was attributed to him, if you just read me the description, I would say, yeah, that's the perfect encapsulation of this film.
100%. And so, like, it's interesting, though, he's nowhere on the featurette. So I don't know if he wasn't available. He's not dead. I checked that. But, like,
okay. And
everyone that talks about him just has wonderful things to say about him. But again, it's that Wes Craven thing where he's just like a really nice guy
who makes really fucked up movies.
I was going to say although, but this isn't really an although situation. I'm just adding on to it because, you know, this movie is not unsubtly a drug allegory.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, this is based partially on Henenlotter's own cocaine addiction.
I mean, it's the 80s.
Yeah, although I will say Aylmer is giving off more of an MDMA effect than a cocaine effect, but...
Yeah, it's hallucinogenic, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I guess MDMA is not really hallucinogenic, but I guess it's more of an acid trip. But either way, the effects of the drug on his life is what he was pulling from.
There we go. We maybe made some bad decisions, and then we had to pay for them.
Well, I think that's why, I mean, like, you know, we talk about how much fun this movie is, but...
It is dark. Like, if you peel it back, this is a man who ruins his life and kills his girlfriend.
Yeah, I mean, the ending is not a happy ending, but it's wild.
It is wild.
Okay, Joe, what happens in this movie?
Okay, so after we open with an electric title card...
Oh, I miss things like this.
Right? Just personality right from the jump. So we then discover this old man, Morris Ackerman, who is played by Theo Barnes, and he's bringing home puny brains. We are upset with the size of these brains. They may or may not cut it, but
well, he's upset about it. But Martha's like, "Oh, they look so good. He's gonna love it," because we don't show Aylmer for a good chunk of this first act.
This is true. Yeah, I mean, I love it because just starting with old people gives us a certain impression, right? So you think, here's a kindly old man coming home to his appreciative wife, and she's excited about brains, and you think, okay, this is off to an odd start. And then we go to deliver. Oh, sorry, I should acknowledge that Martha is played by Lucille St. Peter. And then we go to deliver said puny brains to the bathtub, which is filled with water. And you're like, well, that's also perplexing. And then we freak out because the bathtub is empty. And it shouldn't be, apparently.
Yes. Although I will say, I think this bathwater looks a little too clean for having a black gooey parasite in it. But yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's never really clear. Obviously, Aylmer needs to stay in water to stay hydrated and stuff, but he doesn't seem to shed or need to be cleaned or anything. So, I mean, I think this is us overthinking part of a production where they said, how do we hide the hand for the puppet? Put it in a bucket, put it in the bathtub.
There are definitely some logistical questions I have about this movie, but I do think with Henenlotter specifically, he was going for more of like, let's throw logic out the window. It doesn't really matter. This is about the vibe of the movie.
Sure. Yeah. At this point, basically, once we are maybe 10 or 15 minutes into the movie and we know what's going on, you're either on board or it's not for you.
Yes.
So we go into this bathroom and it's empty. And this produces an unexpected result, which is Martha just begins shrieking, "He's gone!"
Oh my God. And it goes on and on to the point where it does become comical at a certain point.
Yes, yeah, because it feels outsized. Like, okay, it's an empty bathtub. Why are we freaking out? And they ransack this entire apartment. Like, we are destroying everything in sight, looking behind things, pulling bookshelves off the walls, and so on. So this is actually crosscut with the introduction of our protagonist. So in another apartment nearby, we get to see hot young Brian, who is played by Rick Hurst. And I mean,
so hot.
So I've been like horny on Maine for a bunch of these like 80s, 90s people lately. Folks, go back and listen to our conversations about Peter Facinelli in Supernova for this month's commentary, but also like the brothers in Silent Night, Deadly Night. It's just...
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of hot guys lately.
Like, this guy is gorgeous. Unfortunately, like Brian, he is a character. Obviously, he's our protagonist. Like, we don't really get to know Brian for most of this movie because he's high for 90% of it.
Yeah. We get the impression that he is a nice guy based on the reactions of his brother, Mike, who is played by Gordon MacDonald, as well as his girlfriend, Barbara, who is played by Jennifer Lowry. So basically, as the older couple is destroying their entire apartment, we learn that Brian is not feeling well. So he ends up sending his brother and his girlfriend to a concert so that he can sleep it off. Or, in the words of the film, he'll wake up a new man.
That's putting it mildly.
Yeah. So fun fact that I discovered, this is one of the 2 credited pieces that I'm going to reference throughout the episode. So Rain Petrie did a piece for Slayaway called Brain Damage, celebrating 35 years of gay phallic worship. And they say that in the commentary, apparently Henenlotter reveals that these brothers were originally going to be roommates and not brothers. And I do think that would give the film a very different read, because I'm not going to lie, I opened this movie thinking that Brian and Mike were boyfriends.
It's interesting that you say that, because I was thinking I was thinking roommates at first, but then we have Brian say brother, but I didn't know if he was using brother like colloquially, I guess.
Okay.
I wish Mike had more to do in this movie, but
sure.
I guess, I don't know. I wasn't jumping to they're gay in a 1988 movie, you know?
That's fair. I mean, I guess I wasn't sure how many bedrooms were in this apartment. And as a result, I was like, so are they sleeping in the same bed? What's going on? Like, yeah, it does become clear pretty early on that Mike is just a concerned sibling. And you can see the setup coming from a mile away, right? Like, there's a concern that Mike has for Barbara, and she is the put-out girlfriend. And even here early on, it's, oh, hey, brother, can you take my girlfriend because I can't do it? And you're like, oh, well, that's going to turn into something.
Well, because it's very, very obvious from the moment like we first see Mike meet Barbara, or not meet Barbara, but like see Barbara. He has feelings for her. Like, he's looking at her with puppy dog eyes.
Sure. Yeah. But I agree with you. I do wish that Mike and Barbara both had more to do in this film. And I think part of that is, I mean, you said they filmed for 4 months, but it does feel like we just didn't have enough budget to cover additional scenes with these two. So we get a little bit, enough to very clearly understand what is happening between them. But it feels like we could have juiced up both their roles.
Well, and so that's the other thing. Okay, so when they edited this movie the first time, it came out to 66 minutes, and they were like, okay, well, we need to get this to feature length, and the version we have is 85 minutes. But they didn't shoot any more footage. So I think that's why a lot of these shots are so long. But there's another version of this movie that doesn't exist where we're seeing like it's split between, maybe not split, but like 2/3, 1/3 split between the antics of Brian and Aylmer, and then Mike and Barbara like
investigating, doing other things. Yeah, falling in love.
And here's the thing. I think that would fix some of the pacing issues in the sense that, again, just some of those shots just go on for seconds too long.
Sure.
But I also don't care to watch Mike and Barbara go on a hunt.
I mean, even the scenes where they are concerned about Brian and they're trying to figure out what's going on with him, so much of that time you're just thinking, but what are Brian and Aylmer up to? Like, you're so much more invested and interested in the wacky supernatural antics that the regular people are just a bit boring by comparison.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very common issue in these kinds of movies. Like, it's just hard to make a Barbara and a Mike interesting.
Well, I'm also a little, I mean, Mike doesn't die in this movie, which I was a little surprised by.
Yes. I did think we were going to have a slightly higher body count. Okay. So anyway, Mike and Barbara do end up leaving him, and then as they leave, we get this insert shot of the Ackermans lying on the floor of their apartment, and they're just foaming at the mouth. And you think, are they seizing? What's happening here?
Yeah, which, because I knew going into this is going to be like a drug allegory, but I guess I hadn't put it together yet. So yeah, I was very much like, what's going on here? Because we won't really find out. Like, we won't put these pieces together until
a little bit later.
Yeah, like almost to the third act.
I had no idea what this movie was about. I had seen the poster art. I had seen the still image of Brian's face surrounded by the blue water, and I didn't watch a trailer or read a synopsis. So I had no fucking clue where this was going.
Oh, that's really fun.
It was very fun. Speaking of fun for the audience, not at all fun for Brian, he wakes up and he gets out of bed and sees that his hand, his neck, and the bedspread are all covered in blood. So clearly we have had an oopsie while we were sleeping.
Yes. Now, so this is the interesting thing where the drug allegory is like kind of murky to me because he doesn't choose to take his first hit.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Like it's forced upon him.
Yes. Yeah. This is very much a parasite. This is an alien, a demon, whatever you want to call it. But this is something that has attacked him without his consent. And then we will get to consent. Gentle, slightly unwilling consent later on.
Yeah, it's 100%. Well, it's not really blackmail, but it kind of is, but...
A little bit, yeah. It's like if the drug could talk back to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so we rightfully have a bit of a freakout, but I did want to bring in my other reference for the episode. So B.W. Valentine, writing for Gaily Dreadful in a piece called The Trans Subtext in Basket Case and Brain Damage, writes... This scene specifically feels like a scene of my very own mornings when I wake up and realize those days of the month have arrived, and I have to acknowledge the situation of my period once more, something as alien and odd to myself as it is to Brian.
Oh.
So Valentine is actually reading this as like a kind of trans-masculine acknowledgement.
Interesting. Okay, not something I would have immediately jumped to, but that's probably just because I'm not a trans person.
Yeah. I also thought it was an interesting read because, you know, if you watch this film, like, we will not have people come after us and say, oh, I think you're kind of reaching with a bit of the gay stuff, because this movie is extremely gay.
Yeah.
But it's also then easy to disregard other potential queer readings, of which I was excited to find this one.
I was going to say, like, the shower scene alone, like,
Truly.
gay.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so Brian is upset by this blood. He is also, like, his body is not moving correctly, so he's barely able to walk. Like, you know, he thought he was sick, and clearly he is. He's on his hands and knees, but finally makes it into the bathroom, and we get to see these kinds of flashes of light. So his sensory perceptions are being affected as well. So he doesn't end up actually making it to the bathroom because he can't get there. So he goes back to his bloody bed, which I just wrote, ew.
It looks all crusty.
Yeah, like, it's just not something you want to crawl back into. Like, hit the couch.
Yeah.
Even sleeping on the floor, I think, would be better than this.
Yes,
absolutely. But yeah, so we get our first sort of hallucinogenic, trippy visuals as he's looking at the ceiling, and the ceiling light starts to flicker. The soundtrack is going off, but the light eventually turns into a blinking eye.
Which, did you not think this is going to turn into a boob?
No.
I was waiting for a boob, but yes, it becomes an eye. Also, the lighting, because we have this blue water, this blue liquid, and it's got a lot of pinks. They got hardcore bisexual lighting going on here.
There we go. Yeah, and as we mentioned, like, this is a full-on flooding the set piece. So the water begins to creep up. It is that period blue that you see in feminine hygiene products.
Yes, or like oh my god, what do they feed Heather, the main Heather, to make her die?
Oh, a drain cleaner.
The
or
drain
whatever?
cleaner. Yeah, it looks like that.
Yeah, it's very striking, and we watch it fill the entire room up to and then over Brian's mouth and face.
Yeah, I mean this does have that, like, again, I think it's a composite shot where it's like his arm is kind of over the pool that's formed around his bed, and it doesn't look great, but also like it all works anyway for me, like in spite of that. But I also think it's kind of some of the low budget charm working off on me.
I think so too. Yeah, you can forgive a lot even if it doesn't look quite perfect because you know that we're not dealing with a $300 million production.
Well, and also, I don't think this looks lazy at all. Like, I think you can tell that a lot of work went into this.
Yeah, we tried our fucking darndest, and most of it, like 95% of it, looks really fucking good. So please forgive us the other 5.
Agreed.
Yeah, and this is really transfixing, you know. Folks have also occasionally asked us to cover another New York drug movie called Liquid Sky. And I'm not going to say that they're comparable, but they do both have very trippy visuals. And this did kind of remind me a little bit of it.
Okay. I've never heard of Liquid Sky, so okay.
It's an alien who comes to New York and basically infects people. And
okay.
It's less of a conventional horror film, though.
Got it. Yeah, independent science fiction film, but
there we go.
That genre umbrella.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Okay, so following a fade, Brian comes to. He's now on the floor. It feels like, oh, okay, maybe we just either had a bad trip or, you know, a sexy, sweaty dream or something like that. This was probably just a nightmare. So he goes to the bathroom and he examines his sensitive neck. It's obviously painful to the touch, but he does notice here that the bathtub is mysteriously full of water.
Yes, and then the score kind of kicks in, and we can see the shape of something under Brian's shirt.
Yes, yeah. So he thinks that someone has come into the apartment, and that's why the tub is full. So he ends up calling out for people, but you're right, we can see something moving under the shirt, and then all of a sudden, a black phallic-looking tentacle with tiny blue eyes peeks around his shoulder and just goes, hi. And I'm going to give credit to Petrie for this reading, but basically it sounds like an old queen kind of voice, like, hi, Brian.
It kind of does, honestly. And I mean, and that's of course all Zacherley's inflection, but like,
yes,
I think it's a thing where A, you don't really expect it to talk, and B, when it does speak, you don't expect that voice to be coming out of it.
No, because there's a whole other cut of this movie where you could make this threatening and ominous and super creepy. And I do think that this voice is a huge part of the charm because, as we've said, you know, this looks really good, but it also looks a bit uncanny. Like, it doesn't look fully convincingly real. It's very clearly a puppet that has a personality. And I think if you tried to treat this as exceptionally real, or like, I'm imagining if you remade this movie and just made this thing CGI, all the charm is gone.
It's so gone. And honestly, because it's not even like that technologically advanced. And the only things that really, because the tail moves, it bends its head, the mouth, but I and it sounds so silly for me, but it's the eyes. Like, it is the way the eyes move that I think are the best at personifying this thing.
Absolutely. I mean, there's actually studies that people have done for animated cartoons where, like, the bigger you make the eyes, think folks of Shrek, where the cat that's voiced by Antonio Banderas.
Oh, yeah, Puss in Boots.
Puss in Boots, when he like does his like cute little curl up thing and begs.
Yes.
It's all in the eyes. It's how you get people to invest in characters that are not human.
Well, and there is something a little disarming about Aylmer because of the way he speaks. But honestly, I think by the end of the first scene, you're kind of like, oh,
he's not.
This is not good.
Yeah. Okay. So Brian is back in his room. He's talking to this alien as it lounges in a water-filled bucket, and it promises him all kinds of things. A life of light and pleasure with no pain or loneliness. It'll do all of his thinking. All he has to do is put it on the back of his neck and then just take it for a walk because it's hungry.
Which, again, so many questions you should be asking this thing before you decide to just put it on the back of your neck. But
truly, put me on the back of your neck? No, I absolutely will not be doing that.
And again, it's like, trust me, Brian, trust me. And he does.
It does, yes. So Brian puts the creature back on his neck, and we get to see the mouth open in close-up. So there's the series of super sharp teeth, but then also this tiny little proboscis that punctures the hole in Brian's neck. And then we get close-up images of drops of this blue liquid that we saw filling the room up over Brian's brain, and we can see the electricity start to spark.
Yes, and so these were done with animal brains, not human brains, unsurprisingly. But it's still like, I mean, I don't think we need to cut to it every single time we do this, but the effect is still really cool.
It is very cool. Yes, yeah. So Brian gasped in pleasure, like, just to help us understand as an audience, okay, so this isn't a painful thing, although it maybe does have a little bit of pain to it, because he's kind of, you know, when you get that gasp and is that a good gasp or a bad gasp? And
right.
We do see that his fingers are coated in the blue liquid, and then he's making some pretty obvious orgasmic noises.
Yes.
So I wrote in my notes, this is baby's first penetrative sex and orgasm.
Very much so. And that's where, again, like, I think you can really see a lot of the queer readings come in, because, I mean, well, I guess I don't want to call him a final boy because this isn't a slasher film, but it's still like, I feel like, not for this movie specifically, but like normally this role of like this person kind of like preyed on by this thing would fall to a female character, especially in the 80s. And I like that we're getting a male character doing this.
Well, and I mean, I've seen a bunch of different people say this is giving Jesse from Nightmare on Elm Street 2 vibes, right? Like, it's a thing that wants to take possession of the main character, that wants to enter his body forcibly and get him to do things. Yeah. So in this case, Brian just happens to get a secondary effect where he gets to get super high, and then Aylmer gets his brains.
Well, we don't know that yet exactly, though.
Not yet, no. Okay, so we're going to take it for a test drive. Barbara and Mike come home, and she's dismayed that Brian isn't there, and that's because he is screaming like a child with delight at the scrapyard, which, from his drugged-up perspective, is just filled with these kind of neon lights.
I guess because I just constantly equate like these junkyards like this to Nightmare on Elm Street.
Right, yeah, number 3.
Also, but with these psychedelic imagery, like, this feels almost like you could have pulled this out of a Nightmare on Elm Street film.
Truly. Yeah. It feels like when Freddy manipulates your dreams and makes you see different things or things different from your usual perspective. Yeah. Okay, so Brian is making a lot of noise, so we do attract the attention of a gun-toting, I'm going to reference the race because we do kill 2 black men first in this movie.
Yeah, but I will say, I do love... He, like, before he walks outside his little, like, security guard shack, he, like, looks at himself in the mirror wielding this gun. Like, fuck yeah.
It's a very Pam Grier kind of thing, right?
Actually, that might have been the intent.
It very could easily. Yeah. So this is Night Watchman, who is played by Bradley Rhodes, and we get a fairly lengthy, and now that you've referenced the fact that we were trying to stretch the runtime a little bit, maybe that accounts for why this is so much cat and mouse around the scrapyard, because it's not bad. Like, it's not a chase scene, but we are definitely honing in on Brian as he makes his way through. But it does go on a little bit longer than you would expect.
Just a little bit, yeah. But it's okay, because the payoff we get is brain sucking.
Yes. So we get to see Aylmer embed himself in the Night Watchman's head. And I do love that Brian will not witness most of the murders, or he will not witness them when he is quote unquote sober. So he's watching this man die horribly as this parasitic slug burrows into his head. And Brian's reaction is, wow.
And not but only before asking, is he okay?
Yes. To which Aylmer goes, a bit underdone. You're just like, oh, that is pure drag queen.
Oh, and you have that sounds.
And then Brian requests to get juiced again, so we give him a little bit more of a hit.
Oh, but again, this is the weird thing too, where he's like, no, you've had enough. Come on, just a little. Oh, all right.
Yeah, it's very... Baby wants more drugs from the sugar daddy, and sugar daddy says yes.
I mean, and it's like, again, I would have taken more like dialogue with Aylmer in this movie, but yeah, he's a little shit.
Oh, yes. Likes to get into trouble. Has no remorse. All right, so we get a fade to black, and Mike is talking to Barbara about how different Brian is. So some time has passed, as evidenced by the transition, but we learn that Brian no longer leaves the apartment. He spends all of his time in the bath, and if he does answer the phone, he just giggles. So obviously it's suggested that he's high, he's acting completely differently, but I would argue he's also acting slightly infantilized. He's almost been reduced down to a childlike glee.
100%.
Which is evidenced when Aylmer pops out of the bath and Brian acts like a 2-year-old. Like, whoa, just absolutely done.
But I will say, so because we can talk about Barbara and Mike maybe a little bit later when they become more integral to the plot, but
sure.
I will say, so I screened this for my Terror Tuesday screening at the Draft House, and nice crowd, they really enjoyed it, but for some reason one of the biggest laughs this movie got was when Mike shows Barbara the 4 pails in Brian's room.
Yeah, because it's such an unexpected visual, because we know that Aylmer needs water, but it's just like, if you walked into someone's bedroom and just saw 4 giant buckets of water surrounding the bed, you would wonder what the fuck was going on.
Well, yes, absolutely. Because he's like, oh, nothing's really different except these 4 pails full of water on the floor of his bedroom that he changes 4 times a day.
Yeah. Like, what? Why? Okay, so yes, we have a breakup dinner, or tantamount to a breakup dinner with Barbara at a nice restaurant. Brian explains that he's just going through a lot of pretty intense changes. Gay.
Yeah. But he's also not he's not providing any context to Barbara. So
no.
If you just watch this scene, you would have no idea what the fuck he's talking about.
Yeah, and if you read it through Barbara's perspective, your boyfriend's acting super weird. He's kind of dodging you. It definitely feels like he's trying to send you a message. So she suggests that he's on drugs, which is right.
Yes.
And he clarifies it's nothing so simple, which is admittedly true. And then she suspects that he's seeing someone else, which he is.
Technically
so that
true.
is also technically true. And he doesn't respond to this because he's too distracted by the pulsating brains that are multiplying where the meatballs used to be on his plate.
Which, again, Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, this is the...
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Because there is, I think it's in the fourth one when Freddy stabs a brain head in the pizza,
right.
Which I think that would have been actually the same year this came out, 88.
Okay.
So brains on the brain.
And both look fantastic. This is so disgusting and so effective.
Here's the thing. It's not even the visual, I think, that I find is the most effective thing. It's that the brains are breathing heavily.
They're gasping. Oh, it's so nasty.
Oh, it's so great.
Yeah. I mean, it's a surprise that he doesn't have more freakouts given all of the terrible shit that he sees. But then you really get a sense of how powerful the drug is because he seems almost immune, just disaffected by almost all of this.
Well, because would you say he's sober here?
I don't know. I think he's coming down. So he's nearing sobriety as opposed to high out of his fucking tree like he was in the bath.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, he doesn't jump straight into withdrawals. So, I think there's a time period, obviously, that we'll get to before he has to go through those horrible withdrawals. But I think you're right. The process of coming down, because he's lucid enough.
Yeah, I said, he doesn't react in the way that we probably would, but he also doesn't stick around. He bails on Barbara, he bails on the restaurant, and he ends up taking this long walk. I'm not going to lie, I do think that Henenlotter has a kind of visual flair to his direction, and he can make choices that if you were low budget, trying to shoot quickly, if you didn't have permits and you're in New York City, Henenlotter is often making shots harder and more visually interesting than he needs to be. So, for example, this is a long take watching Brian as he storms down the sidewalk, and I'm like, oh, okay, we could have got it. He could have just cut to him leaving the restaurant and then him on the street or something else, and we would understand the same thing. But this is nice. It gives us a bit of a moment to breathe. Well,
and because this is filmed on location in New York, and while most of the interiors are just sets, two pieces of wood put together to make a hallway corner,
right?
This is all the exteriors of New York City, and they were shooting in gross areas, which I think does add to the film quite a bit.
Truly. I love a seedy New York movie, and in the 80s, I mean, here's the thing, we've not reference the fact, but this is at the height of a crack epidemic in the States as well as the AIDS crisis. So the multiplicity of readings, whether you want to say this is a gay film, whether you want to say this is a crack or a drug film, it's both are completely accurate for the time.
Well, and I will say that on that featurette, they're we were shooting in streets where you would walk and you would just be stepping over broken crack pipes and use syringes.
Yeah. I mean, I love the idea of seedy New York, but mostly I'm thinking of it was a little bit grunge. There was maybe dirty movie theaters and stuff, but I think the reality is more what you just described, which is not great.
Yeah, it's not sexy.
No. It's easy for me to say it's sexy because I see it in nostalgic documentaries and films like this.
You mean all the rom-coms where New York is also a character?
Oh my God. What are you, Nancy Myers? Get out of here. Okay, so Brian eventually stops for, I'm going to call it a fix, because he fully fucking molests this brick wall that he's just rubbing himself up and down on.
But at the same, because the way this shot is introduced, it's so interesting because we actually cut to an unhoused person on a stoop who's drinking and
fully thought this character was going to get murdered.
That's what I thought too, and he's just there. He's there just to establish the set, I guess, because we zoom in past him to get to Brian molesting this wall. But what I love, there's a detail that doesn't need to be there, but this unhoused man starts crying after he takes his sip of the bottle before we zoom into Brian. And it's it's
sad. It's sad. It's establishing that this is not a great area, that there's a bunch of people who are down on their luck. I also think it's Henenlotter acknowledging, oh, I know what you think I'm going to do because it's a fucking horror movie.
Yep.
Not going to do it.
But I also think, it's weird. I feel more for this man than I do for most of the characters in this movie. And I'm not saying that as a flaw. I do feel for Brian, but because, as I said before, we don't really get to know Brian before he gets high immediately. But then for some reason, this unhoused man, I'm oh my God, please someone give him a sandwich.
Well, I think it's because we so immediately understand the issues here. Like, we know because we have seen it so many different times. Like, this person probably doesn't have a place to eat, probably hasn't eaten, possibly has addiction problems, and so on. Like, there is no silver lining. And he doesn't get to get high like Brian, or maybe he does. We don't know.
Yeah.
But, like, Brian is clearly the yuppie, solidly middle class guy who gets to hang out in this seedy area because he's a fucking tourist.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, this is just a quickie hookup with the wall. Like, I'm just going to rub up against it because I'm high out of my tree and it feels good.
But what is he nearby, Joe?
He is near Hell, which is a club, not a final destination. But he does go in, he ends up dancing, he's approached by a blonde. Her credit is actually Blonde in Hell, and she's played by Vicky Darnell. So we stumble outside so we can make out, but he is passing out because he is still high. So she takes matters into her own hands, she unzips his fly, and killer blowjob.
I mean, I love the build-up for this, though, because by this point, you, the audience member, knows, okay, this is not going to go well for this girl.
Truly.
We focus so long. Like, the shot of her hand slowly zipping down the zipper, slowly putting her hand inside the fold. Like, I was like, oh my God.
Anticipation.
Like, when is it going to happen? And then, this is like, I think it goes on for like 20 seconds of him being in her mouth.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, I think we get a POV shot of her opening up the fly, and then we see her basically get stuck in the mouth with it. And I think Brian even does the hand on the back of the head to keep her there, which is so porn imagery, right? And you think, oh, in some ways, if you didn't know the context, you would think this is just some XXX hot action. Mm-hmm. And then you realize, oh no, we're fully just murdering this woman and eating her brain.
Yes, and it is a little weird because, I mean, it's like, obviously, it's not his penis that's being sucked, so I don't know what kind of, I guess it's just that he's high right now, so like that's the pleasure he's feeling, but
Well, but this is a pervasive image that we will continue to see, and it's actually part of Petrie's reading and also Valentine's reading, which is that Aylmer is a manifestation of Brian's dick. But if you read this from a queer perspective, then like basically Brian doesn't work for women. Like whenever he gets into these sexy situations, it's always Aylmer who takes over. So this is kind of reflective of Brian's sexual inadequacy.
Okay. Because his dick pulls her brains out.
Yeah. I mean, the surrogate penis does away with this woman.
This, by the way, it looks great. Because we actually see the brains get pulled out of her mouth.
Yes, and that definitely would have been the cut.
Yes, and they were using animal brains, but the fun fact is they couldn't, like, because it's all organic material, it's brain matter, they couldn't, like, use super glue or something to, like, glue pieces together, so they had to hand-stitch pieces of brain matter together.
Oh, gross.
Whatever that spray is that people always use that boys always use in movies before they kissed a girl, they would spray that in her mouth before they did the take to pull the brains out.
Oh, nasty.
Oh, no. I was like, this poor girl, Blonde in Hell, not even a character name, and she has to go through this.
It's funny, all of the people, like, basically, if you are not named Brian, Mike, or Barbara, or Aylmer, all of your character names are just, like, job description and location.
Basically, yeah.
It's too funny. Okay, so this woman is dead. And
shocker.
We do get to see a short sort of insert of Mike talking to Barbara, and it could be from a completely different movie. Like he's hanging out in bed in just his briefs, talking on the phone to this girl that he maybe likes, but he can't like because she's his brother's girlfriend. And meanwhile, I mean, they're still talking about Brian. It's like you could talk about other things, not just the brother, but...
This week's episode is sponsored by Neon's film, Presence. Directed by Steven Soderbergh and written by David Kapp, Presence is a thrilling new ghost story about a family that moves into a new home only to discover that they are not alone. Starring Lucy Liu, Chris Sullivan, and Julia Fox, Presence has been hailed as one of the scariest movies you'll see this year. Experience it in theaters on January 24th.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger for thousands of appetizing ingredients that inspire countless mouth-watering meals. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices. Plus, extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week and up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with points. So you can get big flavors and big savings. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Be honest. When's the last time you had a homemade meal? We get it. Between meetings, workout classes, and the kids' after-school sports, who's got time to cook? That's where HelloFresh comes in. No matter how busy you get, HelloFresh has everything you need to get an easy, home-cooked meal on the table. With flavor-packed recipes like Parmesan herb-crusted salmon, you'll be filling your kitchen with the cozy aromas of a homemade meal in no time. So go ahead, try HelloFresh. It's homemade, made easy. Learn more at HelloFresh.com.
We do get to see Brian stripping off his own blood-soaked underwear in the alley. And again, it's really hard not to read this as a kind of bad sexual encounter, right? Like, oh, I fuck someone and
there's blood everywhere.
And there's blood in my underwear. Like, I got fucked in the ass and there's blood in my underwear. I'm just going to get rid of them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, focus on his ass, by the way. Perfect ass.
I mean, this guy is hot.
It's so hot.
Yeah, so we do have Morris Ackerman showing up and confronting him and calling him stupid for thinking that he can control Aylmer, or Elmer, as it sometimes does truly sound, because this actor playing Morris, like, the pronunciation is not quite there, but I do like that it's a joke we acknowledge within the world of the film.
Well, yeah, because he then flat out spells it out in case you missed it.
Truly this, yeah. But we also get a lot more suggestive language, right? So you think you can control Aylmer, but all he's going to do is drain you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. Because we get the history of Aylmer here, you know? I mean, kind of. And it's interesting, but it's like, okay, basically the bulk of it is he's been traced back to the Fourth Crusades, and either once you get him, you'll either be killed immediately because someone else has killed you to get him.
Yes.
Or he'll just use you until you're done, pretty much. But I get the impression that almost every single person tries to stop at some point, because Aylmer does tell Brian later, oh, you're just like all the others.
Yeah. Because at a certain point, you have to realize as an independent person, you are being controlled. Like, you are being puppeted by this thing, by your quest to be high. And I mean, as a drug allegory, it's pretty fucking surface level. Like, you don't have to go too deep for this. But I do like this idea that, most people try to get off of it, or somebody else will harm them for it. Because I do think that that's an unfortunate reality of people who are in the throes of addiction.
I think you're right.
I mean, depending on the addiction, right? Like,
well, sure.
You do a lot of weed, I don't think you're going to have people trying to kill you. But, some of the harder stuff.
Maybe in a dystopian future where weed is illegal. Wait, it is legal. Where weed is on a, what's the opposite of a surplus?
Shortage?
Yeah, thank you. A shortage? Oh my God.
Okay, yeah, so Brian doesn't need to hear this and doesn't particularly care. He thinks that this old man's a kook. He's like, fine, whatever. He's still mine. So he just throws Morris to the ground, rushes into the apartment. But unfortunately, Mike and Barbara are ready to stage an intervention. So Brian just bails on that shit as well. And the next time we see him, he's coming out of the subway station so that he can go to the Sunshine Hotel, which is
a flop house?
Seedy. Yeah, it's often referred to as a flop house in a lot of people's reviews and summaries and stuff, but this is cruisy. Like, we don't see a woman in here, we only see men.
I was gonna say the exact same thing. Like, it almost feels like, I mean, from the exterior it looks like a gay bathhouse, the interior it looks like a crack house, but still.
Yeah, little from column A, little from column B.
I was gonna say, why did he go here? But I guess probably because it was really, really cheap.
Really cheap, and seedy shit may not go reported. Like, the cops probably aren't going to burst in at any given moment because the behavior is anticipated.
Yeah.
So Brian is trying to figure out what's happened. And this is our clue that he doesn't remember anything about the killer blowjob. And I by extension, the Night Watchman as well.
And I think that, because that, up until this point, is something that's not fully clear, because he asked Aylmer about the Night Watchman, is he going to be okay?
It's like, no. No.
But this is now when Aylmer kind of drops all pretenses.
Truly, yeah. Also, I do love the line, all I remember is feeling something sticky in my pants and finding them covered in blood. To which I wrote, same girl.
By the way, that was my other option for my first thing at the top of the episode, in case you stole Plead for My Juice.
Okay. I would never steal juice from you, Trace. All right. So yes, Brian is indignant. He's very upset to have discovered that Aylmer has been killing people and sort of using his body to do so. So, Aylmer does say of the Night Watchman's death, he says, sucked him dry in a junkyard. To which it's like, oh, the language is just so on point.
No, the nonchalant way, he's like, you sucked at her brains? Yeah, right through her mouth.
I also love that when Brian gets upset, he throws a lamp and Aylmer just calls him tacky.
Well, he has like a great 90-degree bend, too, to miss that thing. Although even though the lamp wasn't even close to hitting him, because I'm sure
we don't want to risk it.
Can't fuck up that puppet.
Yeah, so we have reached a détente. We will see who cracks first, the person who needs brains or the person who needs juice.
Well, and that's the thing. So this is when we finally, Aylmer's like, hey, he doesn't say withdrawals, but like he's like, you're going to go through some major withdrawals, and I promise you're going to beg me for that before I beg for brains.
Yeah. It's unclear how long has passed when we catch back up with Brian. Like, it's a moment within the non-diegetic world of the film,
right.
But Brian is not doing well. He's definitely vomiting. He's covered in his own juices, for lack of a better term. He's definitely crying, and Aylmer is delighting in all of this, because all he has to do is just hang out in this wet bucket and, say things like, only my juice will help you.
Which just sounds so funny.
I mean, yeah, truly, I think the line of the movie, even just because it reflects the gently S&M kind of kinky relationship between parasite and human, is when he says, ready to crawl across the floor and beg for my juice. Like, that line is just, it's fucking gold.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yes. I don't have anything else to add. I was like, do I have something to add to that? No, I don't. It is just perfect.
I mean, just the word choice of juice. Apparently, Henenlotter and many of the people on the crew said, oh, yeah, we absolutely knew what we were doing with writing dialogue like this. Because, some people said, well, it seems like it could come off a little bit gay. And they said, yes. All right. So we fade to black, and now Brian is really on the down and outs. And Aylmer is being a total piece of shit. Like, just having so much fun singing a fucking song.
Oh, which, by the way, I had to look this up. It is Aylmer's tune. Like, this is an actual song that was written back in the 40s.
Yes, yeah. I thought it was something that they wrote specifically for the film, but no, this is something that they brought forward nearly 50 years later.
Which I love that they didn't change it, even though we changed Aylmer's name to Aylmer. We're like, no, we'll just keep it. Why not?
Yeah. We've already made the Aylmer joke, so we'll just lean into it. Also, I should catch myself. It's probably closer to 40 years, not 50, but that's fine.
That's fine.
Yeah. Okay, so Brian ultimately begs for relief, and Aylmer says, sure, but you're going to have to feed me first.
But which I was like, oh my God, like really? So he has to like get up, move around, and find you a body while he's feeling like this? This looks horrendous. But
yeah,
I mean, can we talk a little bit though about that ear effect? Like, again, if y'all have not watched this movie, like the pulling the brain matter out of the face is just something, it is gross in and of itself. But then all the blood pouring out of his ear.
Yes.
It's such a cool effect. And they get another composite effect where he's on one side. And they use like one of those like aluminum dryer vent tubes to pour the blood out. And they said we didn't expect it to be shot out the way it was. But the way the angle of the tube and like just something with gravity, it looked like it was just gushing, like projectile vomiting out of his head. And that was a happy accident.
That's amazing. Yeah, this looks fantastic. And it does. It blows out with quite a bit of force and so much more than you would expect. Because initially he's just kind of pulling it and you think, okay, we're just going to do that stretchy rain thing that we do in a lot of films. And then it'll be over. And then it just keeps going. And then it gets really liquidy and starts to go.
And again, one of those shots where it's like, it goes on forever, but he's also screaming for the entirety of the shot. And it just, it's horrific. And then it just becomes funny because it doesn't stop.
Yeah, and I think also because we realize, because when he first started to do it, I thought, wow, what if this is a side effect and he is starting to lose his own brain matter and it's leaking out of him? And then I realized, this is a nightmare sequence. This is part of the withdrawal.
Yes, which normally this would bug me, but I do believe that if you're going through withdrawals of whatever this is, you'd probably be hallucinating a little bit.
Sure, yeah.
Because it also seems like Aylmer knows what he's seeing.
Yeah. Again, if we are led to believe that people have tried to do this before, then Aylmer probably has a pretty good rundown. But it seems as if Aylmer is able to read a bit of Brian's mind as well, because he seems to know what Brian is thinking or feeling.
Yes, which I feel like that. Yes, I buy into that because I feel like they've
he's tapping into his brain, and our emotions are produced by chemicals in the brain.
Well, and also, how many times is he getting juiced per day? So I feel like every time he juices him, like he gets a little bit of like,
oh my god,
what's going on in his brain?
How?
Wait, what did you think I was going to say?
No, you said every time he juices him, and I was just like, people just came in, heard that one line from someone listening to this independent, like, hi, honey, I'm home. Every time he juices him. Don't worry, dear. It's just horror queers, those fucking boys.
Oh, my God. I wonder if that's happened to people listening to our show. I'm sure.
Folks, tell us about the weirdest or most humiliating moment when someone else heard you listening to the podcast out of context. We want to know.
I really do.
Okay, so yes, Brian has to pick himself up. He looks like absolute dog shit. Sidebar, still hot. Would still do.
He looks sweaty and pale, but still hot.
Yes, yeah. So he is stumbling around this bathhouse, flophouse, and we think initially he's going to try to take down two guys at once. So there's this sort of bigger guy in a bandana, and we're talking about nuclear war to this other guy, and you think, I don't know that Brian can take either one of these guys in his state.
Right.
And once again, subversive. We don't even try with either of these two. So instead, we stumble into the shower.
Oh my God, Joe.
I mean, this is, again, giving Nightmare on Elm Street 2 vibes, right?
It really is. We hold. So this 80s porn actor, probably, he's not actually one, I don't think, but like he looks
I think he's actually like a fitness model bodybuilder, but yeah, this is guy in shower who is played by Joe Gonzalez.
Okay, like we hold so long on his backside as the suds go down his ass crack. I was like, is this a porno now? Like, okay, let's go.
Answer, yes.
Which, and again, you think, okay, he's gonna kill this guy.
Yes.
You even had this guy be like, hey man, it's okay. Ain't no one gonna bother you here, which
Again, it's giving bathhouse, right?
Yes.
Because it's almost, hey, I haven't seen you here before. You don't have to worry. Nobody's going to interrupt us. Drop the towel. Let's have some fun.
That's 100% where I thought we were going. And so I was I wasn't disappointed per se because I didn't think we were actually going to get a gay sex scene in this movie. But I was like, oh, he just leaves. Like, we're done with this character.
Yeah. I mean, we do notice that Aylmer drops because we see him on Brian's hip, and then we see Aylmer sort of squiggling through the wet shower floor. But yeah, this guy gets away scot-free. I did want to make a notice. I didn't look up the costume designer for this movie. I don't know if they had one specifically because it's an independent film. But Brian is at this point wearing just a towel, and it's a rather short towel, and it is strategically pinned at his hip in such a way that it looks like he's wearing a mini skirt with a slit that goes all the way up. Like, you are almost seeing everything.
Yeah, again, whenever I watch a movie where someone has a towel wrapped around their waist and it doesn't fall off 2 seconds later, I'm always like, wow. Okay.
Yeah, strategically pinned, but this thing is holding on for dear life, and I don't know how it didn't fall off unless we had
movie magic.
Truly that. But yeah, I just kept waiting for some kind of wardrobe malfunction.
Yeah, but then we have our next person of color getting killed in this movie.
Yes, so this is Toilet Victim, played by Michael Bishop.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so this is another man of color who is in a bathroom stall, and we don't really, like, we get to see him initially, and then we obviously understand that he is being attacked, and we get this very comical point of view shot of Brian watching as blood just begins spurting against the back wall and up onto the ceiling.
This is so fun.
It's very fun.
It goes on for a very long time, but it doesn't stop being funny. I think it's kind of one of those things where, like, it stops being funny, but then it keeps going. And then
circles back around.
Yeah, it gets funny again.
Yep. Yeah, it's all good. That's the thing. Like, I finished this movie with a giant grin on my face and thought, okay, it's not a perfect movie. There's a bunch of things that I would have liked to have seen done differently, but I was so forgiving of those brief little, okay, coulda, woulda, shoulda. And everything else, I was just like, that was a fucking blast. I had so much fun with this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, more films like this, please. Oh, God, I can't wait till we watch Toxic Avenger.
Oh, yes. Okay, so cut to, I mean, obviously we have killed someone in this flop house, so we need to leave. So Brian is sneaking out of the motel. He's going back home, and we see that Mike is not there, and that's because he's been out with Barbara. Apparently, they have been searching for Brian. So if you thought they'd already moved ahead and they'd begun dating, the answer is kind of.
Well, because they're quite literally about to fuck.
Yes, but it's mostly just because Mike is, so eager to comfort her. He wants to reassure her that it's okay. She doesn't have to worry about getting dumped by Brian. And also, hey, I can suck your face and then we can fuck.
Yeah. So, okay, we've talked a little bit about Mike, but we haven't really talked about Barbara much in this movie.
What is there to say?
I know. That's the thing. It's like this. I wish I cared about her. She's honestly kind of pathetic. I mean, I kept trying to put myself in her shoes because I was like, girl, you need to leave. Like,
oh, 100%. We know that it's a bad relation. Like, they may have had a good relationship before the movie began, but we don't never get to see it. So all we see is her trying to make it work. And you're just like, no, read the signs. It's not worth it.
Because we also don't know how long they've been together before this movie started. But I get... This is going to be a weird, maybe not a weird comparison, but just an off comparison. But I was getting a lot of Amy from Fright Night from her. But I think Amy has more agency than Barbara.
Yeah, and she actually gets to do something more exciting. Like, unfortunately, Barbara's arc is quite tragic, and you can see it coming a mile away. That's what makes it so tragic. But until that point, you're just like, no, just go.
I didn't think this movie was going to kill her, to be honest.
I could see it, and I didn't think they would have the balls. And then they did.
I think it's one of those things where, like, when a movie is this much fun, I'm always like,
we're not going to kill people.
I'm a little caught off guard when we actually do get some tragedy. Which, I mean, again, like, Barbara's death is tragic for Brian, not as much for the audience, because we just don't know her that much, except for the fact that she loves Brian, and then she's sleeping with Mike.
Which I truly think is the biggest problem with this movie. Like, narratively speaking, there's only a few people who are actually quote-unquote characters. Barbara is meant to be one of them. Her death should mean something to us as an audience. But you're right, because we don't know her, it's like, oh, they did it. How come I don't feel something? How come I don't feel more?
And I think, though, I did still... Well, I'll wait until she dies. But either way, it just... she's a very... Not annoying, but she's a frustrating character.
I watch her, and particularly from a contemporary perspective, I want her to be better and kinder to herself and say, even if Brian is a super cute guy and we once had something good, the way he's treating me is unacceptable, and I'm going to go.
And truthfully, I thought that's where we were going, because I was like, okay, cool, you slept with Mike, cool, you're going to go. But then she follows Brian to the subway and's like, hey, I still want to be with you. And I was like, why?
Yeah, what about his recent behavior has led you to this decision? Like, all signs point to the relationship is over, let it go.
Yes. Oh, but I'm sorry, before we get to the subway, though.
Well, okay, so I actually need to talk about the sex that she has with Mike, because I can't help but wonder if this is part of the reason she chases after Brian, because this is the worst looking hetero sex I have seen in quite some time.
I wasn't seeing a single thrust here. I was seeing them moving their bodies up against each other, but I didn't see any thrusting going on.
It is awful. It truly does not look like either one of them are deriving any kind of pleasure. And I was like, this can't be what we're supposed to take away from this scene. We're not supposed to read this as the sex is bad, are we? I don't think so. I think it just comes off very unsexy.
Yeah, I think if Brian was watching this, I could buy into that, because it's like, oh, well, like, not everything's going to look bland and vanilla to him when he's been on this drug the entire time, but we're not watching it through his eyes.
No. I mean, he does come in and he does interrupt, but he also doesn't care, because at this point he's more worried that he is going to be taken over by Aylmer and he is not going to know that he is killing them, which is, spoiler alert, what he will do to Barbara.
But what about this incestuous threesome hallucination?
Oh man, I mean, this is how you know that I'm a deeply fucked up person. I wanted this to go on longer.
I did too.
Toe that fucking line, because when we start to get it, I was like, we are doing this, and then we just cut, and I was so mad.
As a person who has openly said that they occasionally watch stepbrother porn, yes, this was very much, I was like, yes, let's do this.
Because here's the thing. It actually is hot. And I'm not just saying this as a pervert. Like, think about the way that the sex, the very vanilla, boring, not sexy sex between Mike and Barbara was filmed only moments ago. Consider the way that the guy in the shower was framed.
Yeah.
We know that Henenlotter can make things sexy if he wants to. And so when we get to see this nightmare hallucination threesome, it is actually kind of hot.
Yes.
And so, I don't know, like, I'm perplexed by the really shitty looking sex scene between Mike and Barbara then.
Well, also, I do want to point out, because we do get to see Jennifer Lowry's breasts in this scene, but I do find it interesting that in this 80s, like, exploitation film, like, we have way more male nudity than female nudity, and Barbara's nudity feels way less exploitative than the male nudity in the film.
It does, even to the point where when they have sex, Brian is listening to them in his bedroom. And again, because Aylmer is the personification of his own penis, we just see this sight gag of it looks like he has an erection under the covers.
Yes. Oh my God. that also got a big laugh.
We're undercutting the shitty sex with this like sight gag from Brian's perspective.
Why not?
Why not? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, Brian gets juiced before then we have the incest nightmare scene, which is how it comes about. And then he realizes, okay, I cannot differentiate fact from fiction. So I need you both to leave or I am going to leave. So he bails. And once again, he's out on the street, except this time Barbara is following him. And we should note that this is actually after he pushes her. Physically pushes her away.
It's honestly to the point where I was kind of like, okay, you deserve whatever you have coming for you. Like,
girl, just say no. Like, how good could the sex have been that she is still after this guy? Because he seems like a bit of a man-child otherwise.
And I think maybe that's why it's good that we don't have more backstory about their relationship, because I think if they said, oh, they've been together for 4 years, they're going to get married soon, like that's just telling us.
Wouldn't that make it more believable then that she would try everything to keep this together? Like,
it does.
You were going to meet my mom next week.
It does, but I feel like that's just lazy because we're being told this and not shown this. And so I would rather not be told it and not shown it than told it and not shown it. Or you have to show us. Like, show first, tell later.
How many times did you just say show?
I know.
Yes, no, it's either show it or don't. And in this case, I guess we decided not to. And I'm actually kind of fine with it, but her reactions don't entirely make sense to me, especially from a contemporary perspective. It's very, no, girl.
Well,
no.
because I can even buy her going after him to make sure he's okay, because he clearly is not okay.
Yeah.
But then in the subway, we get the whole, like, I want to be with you. And I'm like, okay, what? Like, no.
No, it needs to be, I want to be with you when we go to rehab so that you can get clean.
Granted, though, I mean, because I know you said earlier, like, we don't really have a full timeline of this, but I think it's only been a few days. So it's not like...
Yeah, it seems very fast.
Yeah, it's not like he's been doing this for weeks or days. So I guess on that level, it's kind of like, okay, well, maybe it's not breakup worthy, but you did fuck his brother.
Yeah, which is also a pretty telltale sign. Like, I'm getting the cold shoulder from the guy that I purport to love, but I am finding solace with his brother. Maybe that means the former relationship is not worth pursuing anymore.
Well, she didn't have time to find out.
No, but before we take care of poor Barbara here on this subway car, we do get our cameo from Basket Case. So we have Dwayne, who is played by Kevin Vantenrick, and we should note that he is wearing a wig to make him look closer to what he looks like in Basket Case. He does not normally have this hair. And then we don't get to see Belial, but we do get to see the wicker basket.
Yeah, with a lock on it, which again, I have not even seen these movies, and I was like, oh, that has to be Basket Case.
Yes, yeah. And I like the idea that they are creeped out by Brian, that they get off the subway car. So, that's kind of saying something, that the brothers look at this guy and say, I don't want to be in this proximity.
Yeah, but I do like the kind of like looks both men give each other, where it's kind of like, we both got a parasite on us.
Well, I don't think that's fair to Belial, but we will tackle that conversation on another day.
Yes.
Okay, so yes, we do have this moment where Barbara is trying to reason with Brian. She wants him back. I love these images where whenever she looks away, we see Aylmer lunge at her.
Again, not a great effect, because it's clearly like, this is not the puppet. This is like an animation type thing. But I don't care, because it happens. It's like split second things, but it's so cool the way it's like, that effect when the train, this is a subway, but when the train goes under a tunnel and it gets dark for a split second, it's the way this is cut is really cool.
Well, it's also shocking. It's not something that I expected we were going to do. So when we do it, the impact is actually pretty visceral.
Oh, well, because there's something too about, because she kisses him and immediately she's getting brained.
Yeah.
But it's the shot over his shoulder where it's like her eyes are going in the back of her head. That is really upsetting.
It is. Yeah, I mean, we know at this point that she's probably a bit of a goner. The only thing that might protect her is the fact that we're doing this in a very public space. And of course, the film undercuts the tragedy by having this woman observe them appearing to have what looks like a fairly passionate kiss. And she just kind of humps like, these lovers these days.
But then we kind of go a little bit further, though, because once she's dead, he lays her body down on the seat and it just looks like she's passed out in the subway.
Yeah.
And no one cares. People just walk by her.
Yep. It's such an unceremonious end. And we've said, Barbara's not really a fleshed out character, but she was our female protagonist in this movie. So you realize, this movie is now heading for a pretty dark ending.
Yes. Which, well, I was going to say, it's coming faster than we think.
It's very near, yes.
Yeah. It'll be like 5 minutes left in this movie.
Yeah, okay. So Brian heads back to the alley by the apartment where he was confronted by Mr. Mallory. And once again, he's removing bloody items of clothing. So in this case, he takes off his sweater. Ugh. And this is when both Mr. and Mrs. Mallory arrive. They have a gun.
So, okay. Do you get because they still look like shit, but I guess they're still be able to function. But like, do you think they're still going through withdrawals?
I think so, and I think the suggestion, you can quibble with me, you can combat me. I think the withdrawals will kill you.
Okay, I don't disagree. I was actually thinking you were going to say the withdrawals will last forever.
Oh, I mean, both terrible fates. Because it really suggests that there was no way for Brian to ever get away.
Which is why the drug allegory is a little bit muddled for me, because he doesn't choose to do it the first time.
What about the gay one, though? You can't get away from it. You can't get away from it.
That is true. That is, yeah. The gay one works fine, but the drug allegory. But although I guess though, I mean, like, there's some people that are given drugs against their will, and then they become addicted.
Yeah.
So maybe that wasn't Henenlotter's case, but that does happen to people.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably us going a little too far into it. I think part of this is this suggestion that it will fuck up your life and it will have ripple effects on the people around you, and that even if you try to get clean, you won't be back to the way you were before. You'll be different.
Well, I think too, and I'm not saying I think this, but I think when it comes to drug addiction, there's a large subset of the population that are like, oh, well, if you don't want to get addicted, don't do drugs. Like, you have a choice. Blah 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 blah. Exactly. And so I think maybe this was a conscious choice by Henenlotter to spark some empathy or sympathy for Brian, to be like, oh, he didn't choose the first one, so he was kind of like.
Yeah, because even what we know of the Mallorys, they sought this out. Like, the first interaction that Mr. Mallory has with Brian when he confronts him, he says, I paid for him and I've killed for him. Like, as though suggesting I did what I needed to do to get this mythological creature and I want the benefits of it. Whereas for Brian, it's, I went to bed and I woke up and I'm now addicted to the juice.
Yes. Now, I was really confused as to why these people think that Aylmer's not going to kill them.
It seems very misguided on their behalf, but I think they truly thought, okay, well, we had a good enough relationship for a while, but also he fully up and left her asses. Like, he was in that bath and then he wasn't because he chose to leave it behind.
And he talks to Brian about it in the Flophouse earlier, where he's like, oh, these idiots thought they could keep me feeding me animal brains. Like, no, like I escaped and look at them now.
Yeah. It is a little interesting that Aylmer, if he was in fact so dissatisfied, if he just didn't eat them. Like, oh, you're bringing me cow's brains? These are puny? No, I'm just going to eat your wife. Which is in fact what he does here. Yeah. So we try to force Brian to give Aylmer back at gunpoint, and Aylmer makes the decision, oh, you want me that bad? Cool. So he attacks Mrs. Mallory. She goes down. The other part of the creature, the way the creature actually works, I like that people struggle with it. It's not I just, pull it out and throw it away and I'm free. It's like, if he gets into you, you are done.
That's the thing, because clearly, like, in real life, like, you could just pull this thing off your head, but like the acting of
those teeth.
Well, no. I mean, in real life, like the puppet, like the actors can easily just pull this puppet off their head.
Yes,
but it looks like
they're struggling
really hard. Like, they are tugging on this thing and they cannot get it off. So I love
which again,
that.
Like, if a puppet, I mean, I'm curious to know if they had more than one Aylmer puppet, because the way that they are pulling on it, it seems like you got to be more careful with that. What if you break the one and only puppet you got?
They had one small one for wide shots and one big one for close-ups.
That is, ooh.
Yeah. I did want to point out, because, Martha gets killed pretty much immediately, and Morris goes to help her, and then he walks out and he's got Aylmer on the brain.
Yep.
Aylmer on the brain.
I love it.
Did you catch this? So when he dies, he gets he gets pushed up against a brick wall, and he's kind of like sliding down the wall.
Yes.
We are getting shades of Bernard Herrman's Psycho score, like specifically the shower score when Janet Leigh is reaching for the thing. Yes, that is maybe not exactly, but it's the same feel.
Very close.
Yeah, like we are mimicking that score as Morris falls and dies.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I mean, one of the other fun things, like, we've talked a bit about how there's some minor subversions in the way that the narrative unfolds, and you definitely think that both of the Morrises. Oh, I just realized I've been calling them the Morrises, and that's actually just the man's first name. So, yes, we definitely think that Mr. Ackerman is dead here. And
he should be dead, by the way.
He should be dead, but I kind of love the idea that, nope, we need him for just one last little action piece.
So Brian's getting one more juice before he goes to do, because at this point he doesn't even realize he's killed Barbara. Like, he sees her, but he doesn't know, No,
because actually when he sees what is happening to Morris and Martha, that is the first time that he has ever been quote unquote sober and witnessing what Aylmer does. All the other times he's either only seen it the bathroom murder where he sees
the blood.
But But most of the time he's either on the juice or he's seeing it from, some kind of distance or a barrier or something. So this is the first time he sees what Aylmer does without any kind of intoxication.
Well, it doesn't go over well.
No, but then he does still want the juice because he's still in withdrawal. So he puts Aylmer back on his neck. But this is when Morris makes one last gasp and he squeezes Aylmer. So he kills the parasite by squeezing it to death. But in doing so, he gives Brian a concentrated dose.
Well, because it's basically like squeezing Aylmer just squeezes all of the liquid into his brain. So we get, again, one of these other close-ups of Brian's brain as it is flooded with Aylmer's blue liquid.
Yeah. Not to be confused with the glue, but rather the Aylmer's blue liquid.
No, it's Aylmer's tune, not glue.
Right, yes. Okay, so this obviously has an effect on Brian. So Morris dies after this, and
so does Aylmer.
Yes, so it's just Brian, but his head is pulsing with this reaction. He ends up managing to make it upstairs, and Mike invites him back into the apartment, and we hear the police sirens approaching, and we stay at the ground level as they arrive, and we can hear shots fired, and when we look up we see all of these flashing lights from the bedroom. So we go up, and this is where the movie ends. The cops come in, and we see that Brian... I'm choosing to read it as Brian did this to himself, right?
Yes, 100%. Like, I do want to point out, though, that the bulge on his head, like, that just keeps getting bigger and bigger, is one of the grossest effects I've ever seen. That is horrifying. It's
exceptionally gross. It is incredibly effective. Like, we're watching it pulse and grow. And it's partial, like... It could become a unicorn, or it could be like a dick. Like it very much looks like he's about to grow a dildo out of his forehead.
100%.
Yeah, but when the police break in, Brian's entire top of head is gone. He is still alive, but now his head is just shooting electric sparks into the air and emitting this flashing, almost like a floodlight.
Yes, absolutely. But I do think the implication is that, yes, he was trying to die by suicide here, or at least fix his headache.
That's the thing, right? It looked very, very painful because it's just too much.
Because he overdosed. He overdosed.
Yeah. So he does this, but it doesn't work because he's still alive, at least when we cut to black and the movie is just now over. But the implications are wild. What does happen next?
Yeah, I think... Because I usually when I walk out of the theater like during the closing moments, and I kind of stand and watch it so I can greet people outside when I'm screening this in the draft house. Yeah. And when the movie ends, I'll either get clapping or like whatever. I don't think people knew really this was going to be the end of the movie because it was kind of like
it's so abrupt,
like a dead silence where it's like, wait, oh, that's the end of the movie.
It's over. Yeah. No closure, no catharsis. It's just okay. I don't think it's a bad ending, but it's definitely one of those. Where's brain damage to? I want to watch. What do you mean there's no brain damage to?
Yeah, I wonder if it's too because like it's a cult film, it got its audience kind of later on the home video circuit, and by then he was already doing Basket Case 2, then Frankenhooker, then Basket Case 3.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I would love to see where else we would go and what that could look like, I also do think that this is a satisfying enough story and ending that I don't think you need to touch it. Like I'm kind of, sometimes I wistfully look back. This is maybe the nostalgia as I get older and older, but I don't always think that everything needs a sequel or a franchise. Sometimes it can just be, that's a really great fucking movie and it's a one and done.
Well, and I was thinking the whole time too, I was like, I would love to see this remade. But to your point from earlier, like
CGI.
I don't think a single, if this movie was remade, like now, I don't think we would ever get a puppet. We would get CGI. I don't think it would be nearly as gross as this. I think we get a lot of CGI blood too, I think. I don't think it would have the balls to do the blowjob scene.
No. Oh God, no. Because even as we were talking about it, it's just like, this is so rude and crude and lewd, but obviously purposefully, and that's what makes it so memorable. That's why people still talk about this movie, is because it is doing all of these things and it's doing them so well. But you're right, it would be defanged Aylmer would be defanged.
And okay, because you had a different. I'm going to make like a slight tangent, and you can like shut me up if it's weird.
Sure.
Like, I'm going to compare it to then that Toxic Avenger remake because
the one that no one can see that you and I have seen, and
yes.
like, guess what, folks? It's a perfectly serviceable movie, and there's no reason why it shouldn't have been released by now.
I agree with that, but you liked it more than I did, and I think
I did.
But for me, because have you seen the original?
I've not seen the original.
Okay, because the original is kind of, again, it's like rude, crude, that kind of exploitation film. It's like, and the remake, while it is fun, I will give it that, it loses that edge, that exploitation edge. And so I guess that's what I'm comparing it to. Like, I don't think a remake of this would necessarily be bad,
right?
But I don't think it would have anywhere near the same edge this movie has.
Right. Losing some of that independent spirit and just, I mean, it feels like so many things have to sand the edges off to make them either marketable or even just palatable. Like we don't want to run the risk of offending anyone because we don't want to get insert whatever punishment. I was going to say canceled, and then I was like, I don't even subscribe to that. Why do I keep using it as an example?
But I'm telling you, Joe, that original Toxic Avenger has one of the best child deaths I have ever seen in a film. And not just because of the way the kid dies, it goes on. And on and on.
Trace, do not tease me with a good time.
I'm telling you. And it's like in the first 20 minutes of the movie.
Wild.
Anyway.
Okay. So one thing I wanted to bring back, just because every once in a while, folks who have just recently discovered the pod say, whatever happened to the games that you guys used to play? So I was thinking for some of these shorter episodes where it's just you and I might bring them back.
Okay.
So you raised it, and now I would like you to up the ante. Who could direct a remake of this and keep that edge and that spirit alive?
Oh my God. This person's not going to ever do it, but...
Okay. No. This is just for us and our listeners.
I'm going to say James Gunn because look at what he did with Slither, which is essentially like a big budget B-exploitation movie.
Okay, that is so funny because I have someone in mind as well, and I think like they would both be very honored, and they're kind of from like the same school. I was going to say Joe Lynch.
Oh, yes. Okay, actually, here's the thing, because I would trust Joe Lynch more to do practical effects than I do James Gunn, because even though...
At this point,
but I love Slither, which is 2006, but all those slugs are CGI.
That is true. Yeah.
But that's also a budget thing, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing, right? I mean, you can't make this movie for under $2 million now. Like, it's very difficult to make any movie for $2 million or less now. But I think even if you wanted to have a really effective looking puppet prosthetic kind of deal, well, it's going to cost you.
And I think because, we can say, oh, well, the original Brain Damage was $1.5 million. Adjusted for inflation, that's like $3 million today. So you can easily do it. But it's not just the inflation. It's more so, well, how much do all these practical effects cost now to how much they did back in the 80s? Because the reason we get CGI is because while in the 90s it was way more expensive than practical, now it's the opposite. CGI is much cheaper than practical effects.
Yeah.
So
but as a result, we're always so much more appreciative when people go the extra mile.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, I won't harp on anymore, but like, again, give me a shitty practical effect over a good CGI effect any day of the week.
Yeah. Okay, so folks, you've heard our two suggestions. I would love to know who else you think could deliver the goods. I'm a little disappointed in us that we both just immediately went for like white men of a certain age. So if folks have some, unexpected picks, let us know.
Okay, I've got your person of color, but I don't think he really directs anymore, but Ernest Dickerson.
Oh my, I need that man to be back in making movies. I miss him. I want him back.
Yeah.
Like yesterday.
Yeah, I know. And we know he'd do practical effects. Everyone obviously go watch Demon Knight, but go watch Bones too.
Yes. And here's the thing. He would make it weird sexy too.
Yes, he absolutely would. Absolutely would.
Because that's the other thing is like, it needs to be practical effects. It needs to be a little bit gross, a little bit rude, but it also needs to have that weird sex factor to it.
Which again, movies, I mean, unless you're the substance, like movies today, that's the thing. If you're European, you can do this.
Okay, you know what? New production. We're taking the whole fucking ship over to Europe.
The pond.
Somebody over there can make it.
Okay, everyone. Well, that has been Brain Damage. We hope that this was worth the wait, because you're right, Joe. People have been requesting this for years.
Yeah.
Before we announce what we're covering next week, though, some housekeeping. If you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Blue Sky and Instagram at HorrorQueers. Shoot us an email at horrorqueers@gmail.com. Find us on Letterboxd to keep track of all the films we've covered. If you want to chat with other listeners, join our Facebook Horror Queers group. If you have a moment, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you want more content, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. If you subscribe today, you will get 359 and a half hours of Patreon content, including this month's new episodes on Bloody Axe Wound, The Creep Tape Season 1, Squid Game Season 1 and Season 2, Lee Winnell's Wolfman, to tie in with that episode last week on the original The Wolfman, and a brand new audio commentary on sci-fi schlock Supernova with Angela Bassett, James Spader, Peter Facinelli, Robin Tunney, Lou Diamond Phillips, the cast of everyone.
The cast is stacked, and the movie is terrible.
For its 25th anniversary.
Yeah.
But Joe...
Yes.
We got a heavy hitter next week.
We do, yeah. So we're going to close out the month with a big, iconic 70s title. I feel like we might get a little bit saddened because as of the point that we're recording this today, literally, we just learned that the gym was burned down, which is kind of weird considering that we are talking about Carrie, the original.
Oh man, I missed that news. But yes, we are discussing the original Carrie, Brian De Palma's classic. A sequel 5 years in the making for us, since The Rage Carrie 2 was one of our very first episodes.
Yeah, good episode. I like that.
Good episode, yeah. But until next week, everyone, we can cross out brain damage.
Indeed, and cross out horror queers.